What are the barriers to creating a totally transparent government in the UK?
One is sort of inevitably, I suppose, a kind of culture within the public service that is sometimes sceptical of the benefits of transparency, and sceptical not because as human beings individuals don't understand why it's important, but because in prioritising what they do, nobody really has yet made the arguments for transparency being a proper priority for different public services. So, we need to go in there and we need to tell the doctors, the teachers, the social workers why this matters in terms of their own businesses. This is going to help you because if you have information about your service, you'll be able to do better. And that's kind of the story we haven't yet really properly told. We're telling it now, but we've only just really started it. So I think there's a narrative about culture within the public service that I'm certain we can overcome, but it's there and we need to address it. And I think the other barrier, which is something I raised earlier in the meeting today, is to do with actually the non-governmental components of society actually knowing the data is there and using it. So government can create the lake, but taking the horse to the water is a really serious problem for us. And that's partly media not being entrepreneurial enough in its own response to data, and figuring out that actually there are all sorts of ways in which the sorts of data we're releasing, transport, criminal justice, health data and so on, are very potentially really valuable commodities in delivery of information, to consumers of newspapers or the internet. There's sort of existing players not knowing about the data and how to extract value from it, but also I think we don't have a large enough knowledge infrastructure. So we need to build the knowledge economy and take that knowledge economy to the large lake that we are now building of the data. So that's the other issue for us is creating demand, is nursing demand for open government in a way that's going to make it real and create the kind of the marketplace for the information.
And you talk about taking this story out to doctors and social workers. Yeah. You're doing very strongly with it in central government departments. What's your view of how it's going down in local authorities, in local government?
So, well, I don't think of it like that. I think of health, criminal justice, of education. For me, those aren't central government things. I mean, I'm interested in central government transparency, and we've done a lot on financial transparency and contracts, but I'm really interested in the school or the hospital or the primary care practice. In some cases, you're right, we do have national data sets that sort of are curated by government departments, but we are thinking about this story, this narrative of benefit being something we share with the teacher, the school, the hospital. Specifically local government, which is sort of just another one of those local public service places we are building a whole range of different stories with, and actually at the moment I'm incredibly interested in ways in which we can take to local government all the excitement that's happening in the US around the marrying up technology with transparency to deliver all sorts of new services for citizens, and that's something that I can see central government helping to bridge into our local government approach. Yeah.
How important is the role of social media, both by citizens and by government staff, in promoting the transparency agenda across the UK, do you think?
The journey we're on starts with data. So open data is the precondition for everything else. If we don't have any content, then there's no point in having any technology. So we need the data. So that's why we started with data. The next step is open government, which is where you kind of add on participative engagement with citizens, so that we do two things. We have government as a source of information for citizens, which is where we're at now. That's transparency, that's government opening the vaults. But we also have citizens as a source of information for government. And when we get both of those flowing together, we end up with a genuinely transparent society. And we haven't done enough work yet on participation, fully recognise that, but we're building that now. A key part in building our strategy for participation at a very local level is going to be social media. That's clearly going to be a big, but it's not the only part. So I'm interested in data being harvested and shared and published in every channel that's conceivable, because the most important thing about this agenda is that it is inclusive. So whilst for many people social media will be absolutely the most convenient and easiest approach to getting involved, it won't be for everybody.
But what about specifically government staff using social media?
let's say the staff of the NHS is 1.4 million doctors, nurses and others. We are really encouraging the staff of the NHS to think absolutely about how they can use social media to engage with their patients so that they can understand whether they're delivering a good or a not good service. And that's absolutely about real-time feedback. It's about customer insight. It's using all the tools of so that's something that the staff need to do. Now, in a separate way, I think what you're also asking is, as employees of the state, will people, you know, like in the Cabinet Office, will I use social media to communicate? And well, certainly I can't really speak for all of government here because that's not really transparency. That's comms, I suppose. But certainly in the Cabinet Office, we are being really encouraged and actively developing policy around things like Twitter, Facebook, so that we do reach out as people to those we're engaging with. And I mean, I went onto Twitter a few weeks ago and it's turned out to be the most fantastic means of talking really to the whole community of open data. So I mean, I'm loving it, and increasingly people are taking up the opportunity.
Can you tell us a bit about what Jimmy Wales will be doing for the government?
I mean, obviously Number 10 has announced that Jimmy's going to be advising broadly on open government. Actually, I haven't been terribly involved in the conversations with him, and I think the idea now is to sort of flesh out more what his role will be. So that's what will be happening. But I mean, I'm hoping that he'll be able to take all his Wikipedia expertise and help us work more effectively on exactly what we just talked about, which is sort of building government's exploitation of these social media opportunities to encourage and develop much more participative interaction with citizens. So I mean, I think he's got an enormous amount to offer us on that point.
In this morning's session, one thing that came up was the role of procurement law, how that can sometimes be a barrier in creating much more open government. Do you think that's the case in the UK? And also in the UK, how far do we think we should be applying transparency and open government rules to government suppliers?
Yeah, so we have a very, very clear commitment to that really engaging, really providing much greater opportunities for SMEs, small, medium-sized enterprises, in relation to government procurement. It's not my bag, as it were, within the Cabinet Office, but there is a completely clear commitment to that being improved, and to certainly not make government procurement an arduous, overly bureaucratic, complex process, because that disadvantages some of our most innovative entrepreneurs from participating. So a key part to making that process, user-friendly, accessible, and inclusive is, of course, transparency of the process itself. And we've already published a lot in relation to contracts that government's issuing. We have a website, I'm sure you're familiar with it, Contracts Finder, which is proving to be a very useful resource for business in exploring how they might work with government. We're going to be refining that over the coming period. We have plans to make that even more accessible. So, to be honest, I listened to the comments that were made about the US and its issues around procurement. I personally don't think we have such a big issue in the UK. I mean, I think certainly there have been lots of issues, and as a former entrepreneur myself, I've been very pleased to see how the government is responding to criticism of the way in which procurement has been over complicated. But I feel we're on the right track, and I think so long as we are really clear about the need for transparency in the procurement process and of the system, then we'll get to a point which will be much more diverse and constructive than it has been in the past.
In terms of leadership of this whole open data and open government agenda, which are the countries and which are the governments that have really impressed you over the past couple of days here at the conference?
Well, it's funny, every time I come to an open government partnership event, and although it's only really been a year or so since we kind of kicked it off, there have been 4 or 5 events, this being, of course, the biggest. But every time they are distinctive because you kind of touch the cloth of the idea again. It is genuinely inspiring every single time I come. So I mean, it's really hard to single out particular countries because, to be honest, almost every country I've met has got something that is brilliant about what it's proposing to do, and everybody recognises that they're not doing enough, that there are all sorts of obstacles and barriers, and everybody's at a different stage of their development. But we heard Tunisia, what an amazing political commitment to making open government real in a country that's been through a massive crisis. Libya similarly. In fact, Libya's been reaching out to the UK for some support on thinking through how it might do its open data strategy already. So we can see these really sort of almost like emerging nations, new nations reaching out. Then we have the more established community, us, I guess, the US, where there's some really exciting work. The US is doing some fantastic work on helping broker deals between the state and the corporate sector to make information just a lot more accessible to consumers, financial services data, and finally cut through all the complexity, help us be able to compare our banks more easily. And this has been really pioneering work which we're looking at adopting, or at least being very influenced by. So those are examples. I think one of the messages that I get also from this meeting is the number of nations who are not here, who are in fact doing good work. So we've got France, which has just recently appointed somebody to head the whole open data initiative, and they've made some big announcements there about their intention to build. They just launched their data.gov. So one of the things I hope we can do while we're co-chair is not only really help ensure that the new member nations of OGP are supported on their journey into open government, but actually really open the door as widely as possible to others who have started their own journey. So I'm hoping we'll be able to, sort of encourage membership from a whole range of new countries as well.
That's lovely.
Good.
Thank you.